Good evening and welcome to the Obscura Institute. The lamps are lit, the archive is open, and tonight we draw a single file down from the shelves. File 9, The Mystery of the Hum. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let us begin. In the spring of 1976, people in Bristol, in the west of England, began writing letters. Each one described the same thing. A low drone in the house at night, soft and steady, there whenever everything else went quiet. One writer thought it was a factory. Another was sure a truck had been left running somewhere down the street. They went looking, and they found nothing. When a Sunday newspaper printed a few of the letters, hundreds more arrived from all over Britain, from people who had believed they were the only ones. They were describing something that now has a simple name. People call it the hum. It is faint and low and steady. It is usually worse indoors than out, and worse at night than during the day. Most people first notice it in a quiet room at the edge of sleep, when there is nothing else left to cover it. It is not a ringing or a whine. It is something deeper and duller than that. People reach for the same few comparisons every time. A heavy truck idling a couple of streets away. A transformer buzzing on a warm evening. A diesel engine that turned over once and then just kept turning. Often, the person lying in the same bed hears nothing at all. Only a small share of people ever hear it. The ones who do tend to be middle-aged. In one careful survey, most were somewhere between 30 and 60, men and women in roughly equal numbers. When they try to name the pitch, they land low, down around 50 Hz, close to the lowest notes on a bass guitar. Low enough that it can feel less like a sound and more like a kind of pressure. A sound that is faint, but never quite stops. Heard by a few and by no one else in the room. And, as it turns out, very hard to catch on any instrument at all. The hum had almost certainly been heard for a long time before anyone gave it a name. But the case that put it on the map belongs to a small town in northern New Mexico. In the early 1990s, people in Taos began reporting a low, steady sound. Enough of them complained, and firmly enough that the matter did not stay local. It reached the United States Congress. In 1993, a group of scientists was gathered to look into it. The work was led by Joe Mullins, an engineering professor at the University of New Mexico, alongside researchers from Los Alamos and Sandia National Laboratories. This was a serious effort. Engineers and acousticians with real equipment asking a plain question. Was there a sound in Taos? And if so, where was it coming from? They started by surveying the residents. About 1,400 people wrote back. Of those, roughly 2 in 100 said they could hear the hum. That figure turns up again and again in other places, a small slice of the population, and only that slice. Then they tried to measure it. And here, the investigation hit the wall that has stopped nearly everyone since. When the hearers were asked to name the frequency, they did not agree. Their guesses spread across a low band, each person placing the sound at a slightly different pitch. Many described a slow wavering on top, as if the sound were gently pulsing rather than holding perfectly flat. The sound they described was very quiet. Quieter, in fact, than the quietest thing most people can hear at all. The team set up microphones. They set up special antennas built to catch signals far below the range of hearing. They searched for something in the air that matched what people described. They found nothing. No machine, no transmitter, no signal that lined up with the drone people were hearing in their homes. There had been an earlier note from around 1973 of some faint, low-frequency energy in the area picked up in cool weather on still mornings. But that was a long way from an answer. So the Taos investigation ended in an honest and uncomfortable place. The hearers were sincere. Their distress was real. A small, steady share of the town could describe the sound in much the same terms. And the instruments, listening carefully to the air around them, found nothing to match it. If Taos were the only case, you might set it aside as a local oddity. It is not. Once you know what to look for, the hum turns up all over the map, and the reports echo one another in ways that are hard to wave off. Think back to those Bristol letters from the 1970s. In 1977, a paper in the journal Applied Acoustics took the Bristol hum seriously as a noise problem and guessed the cause might be distant industry humming away too low to place. Then there is Auckland in New Zealand. In 2006, an engineering professor named Tom Moyer did something rare. He made one of the first recordings ever linked to the hum, a faint tone at around 56 Hertz, an actual signal caught on tape. As we will see, that is the exception rather than the rule. Lay these places side by side: Taos, Bristol, Auckland, Kokomo, Windsor, and dozens of towns beyond them. The same features keep coming back. The sound is low, it is steady, it is worse indoors and worse at night. Only a few people hear it, and they tend to be middle-aged. And when they reach for a comparison, they reach for the same one: an idling engine, a distant motor, something mechanical and patient. The descriptions do not wander the way you might expect. If it were pure imagination, you might think one person would report a shriek, another a whistle, another a roar. Instead, they gather around the same low note. In 2012, a Canadian man named Glenn McPherson started the World Hum Map and Database Project, a website where people anywhere could log what they were hearing and put it on a map. Thousands of entries have come in. They paint a picture of something genuinely worldwide, not a handful of unlucky towns. Still, it is worth remembering what these numbers are. The share of people who hear it and that 50 Hz pitch come from surveys, from people describing their own experience, not from instruments confirming a sound in the air. They tell us how the hum is felt. They do not, on their own, tell us what it is. Faced with a low mechanical drone, the natural first move is the obvious one. Go and find the machine. For a certain kind of investigator, the hum is not a mystery of the mind at all. It is a hunt for a hidden source, an industrial fan, a gas pipeline, a compressor humming away out of sight. And in a few places, that hunt has worked. The clearest case is Kokomo in Indiana. In the early 2000s, the city took the complaints seriously enough to pay for a real investigation. The investigators found not one source, but two. There was a low tone coming from a cooling tower at a car parts casting plant, and there was an even lower one from an air compressor intake at another factory. Both were real. Both were traced. Both were quieted. That should have been the end of the Kokomo hum. For some people it was, but not for everyone. Even after the tones were dealt with, a few residents still heard something. A partial answer then: real machines, really fixed, and a little of the hum left over. Then there is Windsor, in Ontario, just across the river from Detroit. The Windsor hum began in earnest around the end of 2011, and it was strong. On one evening in 2012, the city received something like 22,000 reports. This was not a faint thing at the edge of sleep. This was a whole community rattled by a low sound. A study was funded to look into it, led by an acoustics expert at the University of Windsor named Colin Novak. Its findings came out in 2014. They pointed most likely to heavy steelmaking on Zug Island, on the American side of the border. Officially, the study was called inconclusive, only because the researchers could not get onto the industrial site to confirm it directly. Then the answer arrived on its own. In the spring of 2020, the blast furnaces on Zug Island went quiet, and the Windsor hum stopped. That is about as clean a confirmation as this field ever gets. There are others. In West Seattle, a hum was traced to a vacuum pump used to unload ships at a cement plant. When the pump was fitted with new silencers, the sound stopped. So the machine hunters have a real record. Where there is a lot of heavy industry nearby, like steel furnaces or casting plants or dockside pumps, a low hum can often be run to ground. But look at what these solved cases share. They all involve big, powerful equipment, and a great many people report the hum in quiet places, in rural towns, and still suburbs with no factory for miles. In those places, there is no such machine to find. So there are two ways to think about the hum. Maybe it is something out in the world, a real sound in the air that most people never notice. Or maybe it is something happening inside the hearer, made within their own hearing, with nothing in the air at all. Start with the outside explanations, since they are the ones that come to mind first. The leading one is low-frequency noise. Machinery, gas pipelines, and their pumping stations, distant infrastructure grinding away below the level most people notice. In the solved cases, that is exactly what turned up, so it clearly explains some of the reports. A stranger idea came from a geophysicist named David Deming, who wondered whether very low radio waves, including the ones militaries use to reach submarines, might somehow play a part. There is not much evidence for it. It is more a question someone raised than a finding that held. The trouble with all the outside explanations is the trouble Taos ran into. If the hum were a sound in the air, you ought to be able to record it. Sometimes you can, as in Auckland or in the solved industrial cases. But very often, in the quiet places, you cannot. The microphones come back empty, even while the hearer insists the sound is right there, which turns us toward the explanations inside the ear. The most discussed is that the hum is a kind of tinnitus, though an unusual one. Ordinary tinnitus is that high ringing many people know. This would be a low, droning version, made somewhere in the hearing itself and audible only to the person whose ears produce it. Another idea is that some people just have unusually sharp, low-frequency hearing, picking up faint sounds the rest of us miss. A third points to the fact that a healthy inner ear can make faint sounds of its own. That one sounds promising until you check the pitch. The sounds a healthy ear makes are far higher than the deep note of the hum. The most serious recent attempt to sort this out appeared in the journal PLOS One under the careful title On the Potential Sources of a Low-Frequency Sound Percept That Only a Few Can Perceive. Researchers worked with 28 people in Germany, most of them describing a tone around 50 Hz. They tested whether unusually sharp low-frequency hearing could explain it, and mostly ruled that out. They tested the sounds the ear makes on its own, and mostly ruled those out too. What they were left with, as their best remaining answer, was that most hearers are probably experiencing a rare, low-frequency form of tinnitus. A sound made inside the ear, real to the person hearing it, with nothing in the outside air to match. It is a small study, just 28 people, and its authors were careful to call these potential sources, not the final word. But it fits a wider view from David Baggerly, a hearing specialist at a Cambridge hospital, who has estimated that a real outside cause probably accounts for only about a third of hum cases. If that is right, then most hearers are not chasing a machine at all. The sound is, in a way, their own. There is one more gentle thread worth mentioning. Jeff Leventhal, who has studied the hum for years, has found that talking therapy can help people cope with it. And it seems to help whether the source turns out to be outside or in, which tells you how tangled the two really are. So where does the hum stand now? A few local hums are genuinely solved. Windsor was the furnaces on Zug Island, confirmed when they fell silent in 2020. Kokomo was a cooling tower and a compressor, at least in large part. West Seattle was a dockside pump. In each of these, there was a real machine making a real low sound, and when the machine went quiet, so did the sound. But those are the loud cases, the industrial ones, and they are the smaller part of the story. The larger phenomenon stays open. The faint drone in quiet towns with no factory in sight, heard by that small, steady share of people, worse indoors and worse after dark. Taos is still, in the end, unexplained. The instruments found nothing there in 1993, and nothing since has quite filled the gap. The best guess these days leans towards something inside the ear, a rare low kind of tinnitus, for the many cases no outside search could crack. But that is a leading idea drawn from a small study, not a settled answer. And maybe that is all right. The people who hear it go on hearing it. Somewhere tonight, in a quiet house, someone is lying awake with a low, steady drone that no one beside them can hear. It was real enough to reach Congress, to fund studies, to fill a map with thousands of entries from around the world. And for most of the people who hear it, it is still just there, soft and patient and low, waiting under the quiet without a name anyone has been able to give it. Have you ever lain awake in a quiet room and heard a low hum that no one else seemed to notice? A sound you could never quite track down? Tell us below. The Institute keeps a record of every account. And that is where we leave File 9 for tonight. Thank you for spending this quiet hour in the archive. If you enjoyed this case file, a like and a subscribe genuinely help the Institute grow. And turning on notifications means the next file finds you the moment it opens. The lamps will stay lit, and the Institute will be here whenever you wish to return. Until then, rest well.